this year, my cat died and me and my girlfriend broke up in the same week. And it happened again. It was the first time in forever that I was so depressed. And everyone from the gym just kept calling me and just being like, come in and train, come in and train, come in and train. It was the last thing I wanted to do. And then I go in and do it. And, some people hugged me, some people said nothing, and we rolled. And like, it was great. I mean, there's just something it's the camaraderie, it's the challenge. It's just a beautiful sport,
Jamie Kilstein, how the hell are you?
Good, man. I am, just been walking around, touching faces. I've been locked in my apartment eating bread. I guess would be the answer to that.
Yeah. For people who don't know you, you're a comic, you're a podcaster, you're a Jiu-Jitsu brown belt. You were super vocal about abstaining from training during the Corona thing, and you've done it with, I'm just there, preaching either, depending who you talk to, doom and gloom or prudence.
You're yelling facts.
Yeah. And you're doing a really good job of using comedy as well to help spread the word. I mean, your first video that I saw that you had done of the guy who wants to train, and this is BS, and then in the next second half of the video he's dying. That was hilarious.
He indeed got Corona. Well, what was funny about that, I have like a preachy answer to or a preachy thing to add to that. But what's funny about that video is I was told that by a bunch of my friends who were like coaches. So for anyone who hasn't seen the video, the first half of it is like, bro, I'm just going to train. I don't care about Corona. I got my Monster Energy drink, blah, 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 blah. And then, quick cut to he is dying and has Corona and all of his friends are dead, and gets super dark. And, but what's funny about that is there were some people who were like, didn't get the joke and were like, man, I love the first half of that video. But then he turned into a total...
really?
I swear to God. But then he turned into a total douchebag at the end. So literally this like cartoon mockery of what I thought like a fictional jock in like an 80s rom-com would be like. People were like, this guy gets it. Monster Energy drink. And then once they found out it was a ruse, they were very upset. But yeah, man, like...
See, there were some people who got mad at me for sharing that because they only watched the first half, and then they were like, peace out, I'm not listening to this moron anymore. And I can forgive them. I can forgive them for not wanting to pollute their minds.
Well, yeah, I mean,
crap.
Isn't that such a microcosm of the internet, right? Where my buddy and I were talking about this. There was that study done when Stephen Colbert was still on, or what? It wasn't you, was it, that I was talking to about this? I was talking to someone about this. There was this study done where when Stephen Colbert was on Comedy Central still, and he was doing his kind of like imitation character of like a Bill O'Reilly type. And I think it was the New York Times that said he was actually really popular amongst conservatives too. And that was kind of like liberals loved that show because he was mocking the conservatives. But a lot of the conservatives thought it was funny because it wasn't that they didn't think he was a character, but they thought there was more realism in that character, right? And so it's just confirmation bias. Like that's what this video was. If people saw it and thought it was the opposite of whatever their view is, they either turned it off or got mad in both directions, which is so interesting.
Mm-hmm. Well, some of the responses that I've received been being pretty vocal about this whole thing. It's indistinguishable from satire. I honestly cannot tell if the person is playing a character or if they're really spouting like every cliche. I mean,
I know.
I grant you that at the end of all this, we may go, okay, certain aspects of our response to Corona were an overreaction.
I hope
it
so,
is
man.
Possible.
I mean, like that's what I hope. People react out of fear. I mean, and also because of our bubbles. Like this goes back to, again, this is kind of a microcosm of a larger problem where we have so much tribalism in social media where we just kind of, we know what the people we choose to follow or what the Twitter algorithm tells us that we will like or that we already know, and then we get to double down on it. So in the very beginning of this, before, I traveled to New York, I did a seminar, and this is when there was just like whispers of Corona. And I was like, this is fine. And I was following, mainly like my 10th Planet friends. And I was like, everything's cool. And there's always
more weed. Must smoke more weed.
More weed. Yeah, that'll stop Corona. There's always some truth in conspiracies. And so what I mean by that is when Donald Trump said, there's fake news, there is. It's not the fake news he was talking about. Every time you get criticized, you can't say that's the fake news. But whether it was ignoring crimes that Obama was committing, whether it was helping us go into war under George Bush with Iraq when they weren't a threat to us, like the media has lied a lot. So you can use that to your advantage. And so people with Corona, when everybody was saying, and this is where I have empathy, when everyone was saying it's an overreaction, the news is just trying to scare you, that is what the news does. And unfortunately, if the news didn't have, especially 24-hour news, such a track record for trying to put us in constant fear so we continue to tune in, then they wouldn't have something to go on. So, but then when it got bad, and this is why I think especially disappointed with some people in the jiu-jitsu community, because what I love about jiu-jitsu people is what we do on the mat is essentially a peer-reviewed study. I have an idea. I'm going to take it to the lab. Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh shit, I guess that doesn't work. That hurt a lot. And so
we've all been there. All of us.
So like in theory, we are critical thinkers, which means that when I was like, oh, the news is exaggerating, this isn't a big deal, blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly it looked like, oh, I might be wrong. And I live in an old person part of town. And like, I'm friends with every old person in a 2-block radius because I play with their dogs whenever I'm going for a walk. I can't risk getting them sick. That's when I could be like, oh shit, I guess I was wrong. And then I went with, I kind of assumed everybody would do that. But the thing is, and I guess another place I'll show empathy, I'm trying to bring something like, I guess, kind of different because I've been ranting about this on my podcast. You've been ranting about it. We had you on. You did a great job on Rear Naked Radio. But the other place I can kind of show a little compassion is, not compassion, where I understand is people come to jiu-jitsu. Like our podcast and myself, I've gotten so many messages from people who are like, I'm really depressed without jiu-jitsu. Or like for me, it's food. Like I have a lot of food issues and, it was easy to get under control when I was getting beat up or when I was fighting people. And so I think people just panicked and they were just scared. Now we should be
scared of losing their lifeline.
Yes.
To sanity.
Now, what I would try to explain to them is, one, you want to be a better person. And it's like, if I have to lose my lifeline, but I save the lives of old people around me, it's worth it. But also, like, if you want jiu-jitsu to be back sooner, let's all quarantine so we can try to kill this thing. And then we'll be able to go back and train sooner. But I do understand that. And one of the sort of mental health aspects I've been focusing on my podcast, on the Jiu-Jitsu podcast, any chance I get, I'm crowbarring it into a Corona question, but is that so many people say that Jiu-Jitsu saved my life, which is true. Saved mine, right? I've been suicidal, depressed, all that. And now that we can't train, they're writing me and they're saying, now I don't know what to do. Jiu-Jitsu saved my life. It helped me with my depression. Now I don't know what to do. And what I try to tell them is that they're so much stronger than they think they are. Because if jiu-jitsu truly changed your life, that means you are right now at your core, whether you're on the mat or not, fundamentally a different person. So if it only changed your life for the 2 hours you're on the mat, it's like, do you leave jiu-jitsu and get in your car and like start sobbing? You know what I mean? Like it changed you. You just have to believe that now you're the kind of person who's strong enough that even though you aren't going to class, you are still a jiu-jitsu person. You are still a changed person, and that you can do it. But fuck, I mean, it's a lot harder. But, you know, I'm so bummed out we can't be having these conversations. And instead, people are just doubling down on being assholes and trying to train or, you know, all that stuff. It's like we could all stop yelling at each other and just be like, hey, how do we help the people who are depressed? How do we help the people who are losing their gyms, you know?
I think it's a very rapidly evolving situation. I mean, right now you see if you're in New York State, it's going to be pretty hard to deny that there's something big going on. But if you're in Tennessee, I could see, and there's only been, I don't know offhand, there's not thousands and thousands and thousands of cases clogging up the ICU yet. The odds that you know somebody who's died from this are pretty slim in Tennessee. But it's a rapidly evolving situation, and that's not going to be the case next week. So I think we got to give people, there's a lot of people shifting their perception, not their beliefs, as the stuff around them.
Yeah, and I mean,
I got some shit. Let's go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I really hope that. But even with that, so I'm in Arizona right now, and we just got the order from the governor a little later. It was a couple days ago, but I've been self-quarantining for like 2 weeks. And to me, it's like I didn't know anyone who died in Arizona, but I was like, that's why I want to quarantine. Like, we should want to before it gets bad, because just like anything, it's like when it gets bad, it's kind of.
I think some people are better at responding to data than others.
Sure.
Some people can look at numbers in Italy and say, holy crap, that's something. And other people can only respond to stories or to like personal experience.
Right. That's a great point.
I mean, I shared a story there was that church choir that got together in Washington State, and they didn't touch. They washed their hands. They stayed distanced. And out of I'm making these numbers up, out of like 40 or 50 people, half of them are sick and 2 of them are just about dead.
Jeez.
It's something like that. And I shared that on my Facebook, and I got some pushback from people who are legitimately asking, is there any proof that those people got sick from that exact choir practice? And of course there isn't.
Right.
But there's so much data that I'm sharing, and that's I'm having a background in science, that's pretty motivating to me.
Yeah.
But I recognize that some people will only respond to anecdote, to parable, to story. I mean,
but to me that's both. To me, that's kind of like, that's data and that's an anecdote that may like.
Yeah.
But
well,
again,
they're correct. There's no proof to say that those people didn't get sick from something else. Like,
I mean, and this is where fear comes in, because there are a lot of people who just don't want our reality to be what it is right now. I don't, I'm taking so much care of myself. And when my groceries got delivered with a person wearing a mask and gloves, I was like, this is super fucking creepy. This is like, and by the way, she's doing the correct thing. And I was still just like, this is horrible. And you don't want to believe it. I would get mad at my family when they would text me about how much worse things are getting, where I'm like, I don't want to know that. And so I almost think when people lash out on Facebook, it's sort of them lashing out to themselves, because they probably deep down know they should be scared and they're just trying not to. And so when they say, well, was it really from the church? What they're really saying is, yeah, but maybe it wasn't from the church, and maybe it's fine, and maybe it's not corona, because I don't want to be terrified that there is like a cinematic like outbreak happening right now.
Mm-hmm. My 16-year-old kid hit me with the whole facts don't care about your feelings thing as we were arguing about something. And so, I think a lot of people are having some pretty strong feelings. And like, let's pivot from the grim world of corona to the happy world of jiu-jitsu saving your life. So there you were, ready to kill yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Guys, if corona was too dark, let me tell you about when I screwed up trying to kill myself. I mean, well, so jiu-jitsu. So I did jiu-jitsu when I was like 17 to like 20. It was, I had a blue belt teacher. Everything was kind of new. I came from a JKD background, and, when I did JKD, so if I was 17, it was probably 1998. It was starting to get commercialized, which kind of means like McDojo'd a little bit. And to me, what attracted me to JKD over, say, karate was that I loved martial arts and I wanted to learn martial arts that I know work. And so Bruce Lee's whole philosophy on paper was MMA before MMA.
Yeah.
It was, belts are only good to tie up your pants. It was, oh, you're going to break boards? Like, boards don't hit back. He was criticizing katas.
Let's spar.
Let's fight.
Let's spar.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's what I thought JKD was. And then I was getting good. I was starting to help out around the academy. It was like a pretty well-known Inosanto academy. And
your Paxo Lopso Guachoy was on point.
All of that. Oh my God. I just had such like a flash, but like a visceral physical reaction when you said that. And so that was around the time, I don't know if you remember this, but when Matt Thornton from SPG because he also started in JKD, started making these like attack ads for JKD and doing challenge matches and, talking about, I think he even put out VHS tapes called like Functional JKD because he was starting to work with guys like Chris Howder and I think even like Hickson and Randy, or there was some kind of, I don't know, so long ago, but there were some kind of affiliations. And right around that time, a blue belt opened an SPG in my neighborhood in New Jersey. And I I felt like I was like cheating. Like I went in like late at night and it was brand new. And there was this oddly jacked guy eating a pizza in the corner. And then the instructor at the desk. And I told him I wanted to like try a class. And he was like, all right, just go spar Dan. And I was like, spar? Because I was at a Bruce Lee school and I never sparred. And, something.
Really?
Okay. Yeah, well, they were sparring like one night a week. And you had to be approved. Like 4 guys showed up. There was no Jiu-Jitsu. I think Jiu-Jitsu was about to incorporate it, but there was no Jiu-Jitsu. It was just Kali, Silat, and then JKD. And JKD at the end, instead of sparring like you would in Jiu-Jitsu, you would do trapping, which is kind of like Wing Chun for you guys. And it's like the really cool fast hands, some of that like Born Identity looking stuff. And Matt Thornton would call that. He would go, Bruce Lee made fun of katas, but essentially trapping is a 2-person kata if you're not doing it with resistance. And so I show up and he goes, yeah, Dan, spar. And I go, oh, okay. All right. Well, I know enough like in my head. I'm like, I can spar. And so this guy who literally just ate half a pizza by himself, and I go, should we wait or should I spar someone else? And the instructor very casually just went, his name was Paul Majatovich, and he's a wonderful guy. He goes, yeah, well, technically if you're going to get in a street fight, chances are it won't be after you like stretched. It'll be after you had like pizza and a beer. And I was like, all right, sound logic. And so I go to spar for the first time, and in my head, he's going to throw a jab, and yeah, Paxao, like punch inside the bicep, back fist, and I'm thinking about all this. And this guy just with a jab, like thank God he was nice to me, just with a jab, just pop me in the face, pop me in the face, pop me in the face. I went and threw up because I was so out of shape. And then I signed up because, again, I was just like, wow, this sucked, but this means that I need to learn this. And so I did that for a while, and I fell in love with it. And then comedy took off, and I was kind of just on the road from 22 to 28, smoking cigarettes, drinking, being really unhealthy. And I was back in New York making a living with comedy, and I was so miserable and I was so depressed and so out of shape that I was like, I have to go back to jiu-jitsu. And I signed up at Marcelo Garcia's. I thought, we didn't do the SBG I was at was like an MMA place, so we didn't have ranks. So I assumed I was a blue belt because I was one of the better people there. And in my head, I go, oh, I'll just be humble. I didn't even know who Marcelo was. I go, I'll just be humble, and I'll start again as a white belt, and then I'll get promoted really quickly. And then I immediately got the shit kicked out of me and was like, I'm a white belt. I am a white belt. And then I didn't tap anybody. Fun fact for anyone struggling as a white belt, I didn't tap anybody until I got my blue belt. So it was just like a year, because I was also smaller. So I didn't even have attributes to like be spazzy about. Like I couldn't, I had nothing. And so, so I just got murdered for like a year. And that was it. I mean, when I say it saved my life, I mean, I was suicidal during all of it. I was, man, even this year, my cat died and me and my girlfriend broke up in the same week. And it happened again. It was the first time in forever that I was so depressed. And everyone from the gym just kept calling me and just being like, come in and train, come in and train, come in and train. It was the last thing I wanted to do. And then I go in and do it. And, you know, some people hugged me, some people said nothing, and we rolled, and like, it was great. I mean, there's just something so, it's the camaraderie, it's the challenge, it's just a beautiful sport. You know, I never went to the gym. That's why this is hard for, I think, a lot of people, you know, because a lot of us like hated working out. I run and I'm like, what? This is so stupid. Like, I hate it. The times I tried to do self-workouts at home, I know we're all trying to be like, here are our self-workout videos and like, we can do it. And like, it sucks. It sucks. You should do it. Every time I run are the days I'm not depressed. Every time I don't work out are the days I'm depressed. I can like line it up.
There is a breakthrough point with running. Like I went through I hated running.
Yeah.
Started running. This is years ago. Hated it. Started running. I should do this.
Yeah.
Hated it. And then finally you reach a breakthrough point where you can actually, and I don't know if that happens for everybody. I know it happened for me, and I loved it for 20 years.
Yeah. Well,
going from hating it, and now I can't do it anymore. My joints are shot, and I miss it fiercely. Because if you got 25 minutes, you can go running for 23 of them and have a quick shower, and you're still good.
Yeah,
There's
man.
Nothing more efficient than that.
So I'm so glad you said that, because this is the advice I gave on the podcast the other day, where because when I would go to the gym, I was like, this is all dumb. Why does everyone look like they want to fight each other? I used to be so self-conscious because I don't know anything about lifting. This is douchey on my part, that I would always wear a jiu-jitsu or a kickboxing shirt to the gym, so that when all these big guys were lifting heavier things than me, in my head, I'm like, yeah, but they see my shirt and they're like, no, I can like beat them up. And so, but with running, so when the quarantine first happened, I tried body weight stuff. And I was like, I hate this. And I hate the gym. And then running has actually been really wonderful for me. So this was the first week I ran 5 days in a row. And the reason is because it's knocking off three things on my list. It's forcing me to go out in nature, get sunlight, be outside, get fresh air, get out of the apartment. And it's exercise, and then I'm catching up on like podcasts. So it's intellectual stimulation, vitamin D, outdoors. And so even if I wasn't enjoying it, I'm like, you know, like just being outside is so nice. I feel like if you guys have like a place that's like, because I have a path by me that's empty, nobody goes there. Although, man, it really does feel like the zombie apocalypse, where like I'll be jogging, and if I see like an old couple, it's literally like if you tracked me and saw dots, it's just me running away from people. I'm like veering into the street to like avoid people. But yeah, so running's been really good for me. But what I was going to say is that, I mean, that is really why I feel for people, because the times that I got the most depressed, I would like, I would go to the gym and I would feel better. Or I would just talk to someone there. I mean, it's so nice to have that jiu-jitsu camaraderie where like, guys, reach out to someone at your gym if you're struggling, because a lot of them, they're not in our personal lives, which is great. They don't know our girlfriends. They don't work with us, but like you feel like such a connection with them because of jiu-jitsu, because jiu-jitsu is
because their balls have been in your face for years, really.
Because their balls have been in your face. Yeah, exactly. You are very intimate, literally, with their balls. And so, but like I said before, like now is the time to become more well-rounded. You know, I said this to a really good friend of mine the other day, who she was struggling because she can't go to jiu-jitsu. And I was like, I will give you a jiu-jitsu analogy, which is if you are a really good guard player and someone goes, or if you have a student who's a really good guard player, but they're horrible, their passing's garbage, they're not good on top, you would say, hey, you have to work on your top game. And they would say, but I really like guard. And you would go, cool, you'll be able to play guard, but you should be well-rounded. You should be able to play everywhere, right? Very simple advice. We kind of right now need to do the same thing as human beings, where if we feel better, and jiu-jitsu has helped us with our mental health, that is incredible. But now we're seeing this is what it's like when jiu-jitsu gets taken away from us. So now is sort of the time to make our game fuller as a human being. So what do we do when jiu-jitsu isn't there? Maybe it's kind of the opposite. Maybe we need to meditate more. Maybe we need to do yoga. Maybe we need to take walks without our phones and contemplate. Maybe we need to journal. Maybe we need to get better sleep. Maybe we need to work on our willpower and see if we can eat healthier, even though there's not going to be someone to hold us accountable by choking the shit out of us the next day. Maybe we need to be more creative. Maybe we're like ignoring our partners for jiu-jitsu and we can just be a better family member or a better husband or a better wife or whatever. And so I think that's kind of the challenge that we can do right now. And look, I don't have kids. I get to work from home, so maybe that's easier said than done. But I think a lot of us are realizing that jiu-jitsu is maybe a duct tape on the hole, and we kind of need a boat. We need to make sure we can do it when we can't train for a little while.
Yeah. Now, I've got a good friend who's going through a breakup now, and I know in his previous breakups, every single time his jiu-jitsu went through the roof because he just took those feelings and sank them into training.
Yep.
And was just, really trained a lot. It was just volume of training went through the roof. All of a sudden, no girlfriend to complain about it.
Yeah.
And he's having a really tough time because he can't use that same strategy. And I imagine that a lot of people, not just breakups, but, dealing with the stress of being at home with your kids. Did you see that video clip of that black dude? Because of Corona, there is a quarantine. You have two choices. Option A, quarantine with your wife and child. Option B is like, option B.
That's funny. That's funny delivery.
It's very, I'll send it to you.
Yeah. Well,
perfect timing.
I think the key is to find something that will put you into like a flow state because jiu-jitsu is a form of mindfulness. At least for me it was, because before I got good at jiu-jitsu, I tried to meditate and do yoga, and it was a disaster because I'm like a neurotic Jew. I have ADD. I'm self-hating. So it's like you put me in a room with my thoughts, and that's just like my literal nightmare. It's hell. And so I would leave meditation.
Forget hell being other people. Hell being yourself.
Hell is me. I know. Whenever people say like shitty things about me on the internet, I'm like, oh, if you think that's bad, you don't have any idea what I'm saying to myself. Like, you will never do as bad as me. And so like when I would try meditating, it was 45 minutes locked in a room with my thoughts. It was I would come out worse, or with more things I had to do, or more people I thought were mad at me, or whatever. And then with jiu-jitsu, so the point of meditation is to be still and to be present and to not have anxiety about the future or regrets about the past or whatever. And jiu-jitsu puts you in that space. You are present. Yeah. You are zen because
you're not thinking about other things. You're not thinking about the shopping list. You're not thinking about because there's a pretty real-time feedback to thinking about the shopping list.
Yes.
Choke the hell out.
Yeah, 100%. And so what I noticed has worked for me is running has been really good. But let's say you can't do something like playing guitar. And by the way, I noticed when I was trying to like practice guitar, I would be in my head a little bit, but then I just like cranked some Miles Davis on the speakers and I literally closed my eyes and I was like, I don't even care if I'm in the right key. And I just played, and suddenly like 10 minutes later, I was like, ugh. And it felt like I meditated. And so finding something.
Please tell me you just weren't doing heroin like Miles Davis.
I was just, yeah. It was like 10 minutes or like 10 days later I woke up. Anyway, can I borrow some money? And so I would, but like anything like that, it could be writing, but not making yourself edit every sentence. It's like, all right, I'm going to take this pen to paper and I'm just going to write for 3 pages, or something like that. Just something to like ground you into the present. It's not going to have the same effect. It's not the same physicality involved. But what I've noticed is combining some kind of exercise with something creative, writing, guitar. I mean, that's why I've been doing those sketches. I never did sketches before, but it's putting me in this place where I have to be 100% grounded or 100% present.
Yeah. For me, I've always enjoyed the wilderness component, especially the paddling That's kind of my, like, sitting in a room meditating is really tough. Like you,
It's
my
tough.
brain is like in search of shiny squirrels all the
Yeah.
time. But
Yeah.
there's something about, if you're fighting your way up a river, say, you have to be in the present. Like,
Or you'll
is my
drown.
angle going to be here or here?
Right.
If I'm off by, if I go this way, it's going to be okay. If I go that way, I'm going to get spun out and I'm going to lose 400 feet of ascent. And if I go like this, I'm going to flip and drown. Right. So there's some real world consequences and feedback. And then you're worrying about and jiu-jitsu is the same way, right? Like, do I grab here or here? Makes a big difference. Do I go here or do I go,
Yeah. I love that me and you,
real world feedback.
I love that it's so hard for me and you to just be like still, that you're like, in order to find stillness, I have to go fight a river.
Well, I mean, the difference between paddling and jiu-jitsu is that in jiu-jitsu, I'm fighting somebody else who's got an ego, somebody else who cares. In whether you're climbing a mountain or battling a rainstorm or going up a river, the river, it doesn't care. It really doesn't care. You're just trying to sneak through the openings.
That's another Ben Shapiro quote. Rivers don't care about your feelings.
Oh.
Yeah, man.
So when you said that you botched your suicide attempt, did you actually have a suicide attempt? Or?
Yeah.
What,
no, 100%.
You okay talking about that? Because it could be really useful for people.
Oh, yeah. I didn't. What's great is I'm not advising anyone on how to do it properly. So like, yeah, I, this was like after my divorce, and it was just like complete rock bottom, probably 7 years ago. And I hated, I had like I made a living with stand-up, but I've always had this very love-hate relationship with stand-up, where there were years I was almost famous and I would self-sabotage, or I would just pull out, or I was very political after 9/11, so I made a lot of my living overseas, because that's where everyone was hiring me. And so I would go to like the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, or
you and the Dixie Chicks.
Me and the Dixie Chicks. Yeah, I know. I should have linked up with them. But and then I was doing like weird gigs where like I opened for like Christopher Hitchens at the Sydney Opera House, and like very non-comedy things. But for example, the day when I got back from Australia, with the Christopher Hitchens, I couldn't get booked at like a shitty comedy club in New York. So it was very like these weird highs and then just complete crashes, which, by the way, you get as a performer anyway. That's our kind of community's theory on why depression and addiction is so rampant with performers, is because you get such this huge high on stage, and then you're
chasing the dopamine hit all the time.
Exactly. You immediately crash. And so, and then the person I used to talk about my depression with, the person, I'm laughing because it's so dark, so brace yourself, everybody. The person who used to help me with my depression was Robin Williams. And so Robin got me my agent and my manager and all this stuff. And he'd call me on the phone, and I was trying to quit drinking, and he would tell me these stories about, when he saw Richard Pryor get sober and all this stuff that I wish I wrote down, but I was never not in shock talking to him. And then he dies, and you definitely have this kind of narcissistic moment where you're like, well, if the person who fucking was helping me kills himself, I'm like, don't have a chance. And but then he was also the one who kept telling me not to quit comedy, and so I was like, all right, I got to keep pushing through. And I was even more miserable, and because I feel like every time I had a bad show, or still when I lost the cat, like my instinct, like I went to email it, like I went to like go to his thing, and then I still have to remember, like, right, he's not around. And so it's just awful. And so I moved to LA, I left New York. I had a really great girlfriend who was like out of town visiting her family. And I just completely rock bottomed, like mentally, just everything. And, for me, I've never felt suicidal just because I'm like, I'm sad. It's always this very claustrophobic sort of, like I'd feel trapped. I'd be like, well, there's no other option. And then I'd almost be like happy where I'm like, oh, right. Like I can kill myself. This is great. And so, so I started mapping it out. And I was Googling it, and here's a fun fact for anyone who is curious. When you Google, I was Googling like least painful ways to kill yourself because I'm brave, and I Googled it, and the first site came up, and it literally just said like least painful ways to kill yourself, and like I'm a free speech guy, but even that I was kind of taken back. But I was like, all right, cool, the internet, and I click on it. And I heard this like suspiciously Christian sounding like acoustic guitar music where it was like, banana. And then it was like, don't kill yourself. We're all children of God. And I was like, motherfuckers. And like, now I'm even more mad because I feel like I'm
a child of Moses.
Yeah. And like, I feel like I'm being lied to. I'm like, can I not trust anybody with just these like poor, sweet people who are trying to save my life? And I was just like, you know what? I'm going to kill myself and I'm going to blame this website. Like, I'm just going crazy in my head. And so then I found a more honest website, and it seemed like rope was the consensus, which is like kind of a bummer because that's how Robin died. But I was like, all right, whatever. And so I buy the supplies and stuff, and then I swear this is so pathetic. I swear to God, look, I didn't graduate Cub Scouts. I never made it to Boy Scouts, and I'm looking at like the knot diagrams, and I can't do it. It looks like I can't put together IKEA furniture. I can't do any of that, and so I'm like trying to tie the knot, and I just break down and completely lose it. Where I'm like, I would be the guy who, like, if I jumped off a bridge, I would like break both legs, and then I'd spend the next 10 years trying to like wheel myself into traffic, and it wouldn't work, and so I just start sobbing about being too much of a screw up to kill myself. My girlfriend gets back. I assume she's going to break up with me. She's actually really wonderful and supporting and kind of helps me get back on my feet. And then I just moved to LA, so I didn't have a gym. I didn't have a gym at the time. I feel like I maybe trained at Cobrini's a couple times because I knew him through like Marcelo, and I trained with Henner and Huron a couple times. They were always really nice to me, but it was very far away. But I didn't have a home gym, and so Kenny Florian, before he opened his school, was like, "Why don't I take you down to Henzo, LA? I'll take you down to Sean Williams' place." And I was like, "All right," and I went there. Was doing really good. I was like a 4-stripe purple from Marcelo, and I was doing really good against the higher level guys. And then 2 weeks later, like I just signed up. Their main instructor besides Sean left to open his own school, and I've been making a living at comedy since I was 22. I dropped out of high school to start, and I'd never wanted a job, quote unquote. I mean, that's why I do what I do. It's not why, but it was like back when I was a shitty 18-year-old, it was why I wanted to be a comic. I didn't want a job. But something just kind of hit me, and I ran up to Sean and was like, hey, I've never taught before, but I'm a performer, so I think I'll be good. And I'm good at explaining details because I was small and I got the shit kicked out of me for a long time. And like, you can see that I fight well. And then I started teaching, and I taught for maybe like 2 years. Ended up, there was a period where I was like running the kids program, and I was teaching Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu and the advanced Jiu-Jitsu. And it was really cool thing because when I was depressed douchebag, I was very political, but not good political. I was like yelling at other people on Twitter political. And I thought I was helping people because I was like a good liberal. But a lot of what I was doing was starting fights and saying stuff for retweets. And, maybe I'd post something about Black Lives Matter that I truly believed. But instead of then going out and doing something about it, I would be refreshing to see if like Questlove followed me or whatever he does. And when I started teaching jiu-jitsu, I was like, oh, this is like the first time I've actually done something. I've actually like become the person I was claiming to be on Twitter, where, like, I mean, you know what it's like, man. Like when you can help an adult who's like been afraid of physical confrontation their whole life, or when you can, help a kid who's crying because they can't figure out a move or whatever. It was the first time that I felt like I was actually giving back, and I wasn't doing it for retweets. Like, nobody saw it. It was just kind of us in that moment. And then, I did that for a couple of years. And then I feel like that kind of got me out of it and sort of prepared me for life. And I've had a lot of really hard moments since then. Moving out of LA, breaking up. I mean, honestly, losing the cat was like the worst thing. But those 2 years at Sean's place or whatever, like, really fundamentally changed me. So yeah, it's funny. I've never put those 2 years into the jiu-jitsu saved my life category. But yeah, that is it.
Okay. I mean, that's amazing. And I think there are, when I release this, which is going to be as soon as possible, a lot of other people are going to reach out to me and probably reach out to you and share their own stories, which I'm not going to share with anybody else.
Yeah, of course.
Their private business.
And they're welcome to. I've really been, it's almost become a full-time job. I don't even have the biggest Instagram following, although it's growing pretty rapidly since I've started doing these jiu-jitsu sketches. But I have been trying to, the people who have written to me about like depression or struggling, I've responded to everybody. So, if you do need someone to even just vent it out to, because you've held it in, I'm reading my DMs and like,
and people have to realize that ultimately that's not scalable, right? Like, I mean, if you get 10 times as many people reaching out to you, I'm sure you're going to do your best, but you ultimately you can't.
Well,
but cross that bridge when you come to it.
Yeah. Well, and what I'll do there have been moments where I've gone on like pretty big shows and talked about it. And so when I get that kind of like huge barrage, I'll usually make a video kind of addressing the larger concept.
Makes sense.
But also at the same time, what I realized is sometimes people just need to write that shit down. And, especially for guys, there's a lot of like...
however you need to rationalize not responding to people who are there right at the edge. You go right ahead. Whatever you need to do. You do you.
Guys, if you could just if you join my Patreon, I have a suicide prevention tier, patreon.com/Jamie Kilsten podcast. Then your chance.
How much is your life worth?
Well, it's $50 a month is what it is, if you're wondering. But like I sometimes, especially for men, I feel like there's a larger conversation about mindfulness and vulnerability when it comes to men that hasn't happened for a really long time. Like Rogan kind of made yoga cool again, or meditation, and Sam Harris with meditation. And so a lot of times I notice when these guys just either they'll tell me after a seminar, or they'll just write it to me. Because the idea, 3 years ago, if I was like, I'm depressed, and they're like, why don't you journal? I'm like, because that's for girls, right? And it's such a stupid gross reaction. But I think a lot of people do. They associate journaling or meditating or yoga with girls. And guys, really, we look at the suicide and depression rates. It's like, I think that's why jiu-jitsu is so good for guys. It's like a way to kind of get a lot of their bullshit out without feeling like quote unquote girly, but you need that balance. Like, we need to learn vulnerability from women. And
it's interesting whether or not, it's a false dichotomy that's being trumpeted right now. The economy versus quarantine.
I'm so glad you said that. Yes.
And the argument that's being made is, if we shut down the economy, then people are going to go out of work. And look at how depression and suicide rates climb when people are out of work. And so, yes, if it was a choice there, either shutting down the economy and having tons of people kill themselves ultimately, or not be able to provide for themselves in old age, versus quarantining and having the virus go away, if that truly was the choice, that'd be a really tough choice. And I'm not an economist, and I'm also not Nostradamus. I can't look into the future and say what's going to happen. But
that is the only reason I came on this podcast, sir. So this is very disappointing to find out.
You want Nostradamus? You can go to my Patreon account.
Damn it, $50 a month.
2 Bitcoin a month.
All right. Well, somebody has to sign up for my suicide tier so I can afford your Patreon. It'll work out. This is the free market, baby.
It'll be the circle that keeps on giving. But if the virus and the disease is uncontrolled, that's going to have massive economic consequences in and of itself, right? There are no good choices. There's only bad and worse. I think we're going to be looking at lots of suicide and depression issues coming up here, regardless of which route we go as a society on this.
Totally. And look, just for anyone listening, I mean, I'm sure you've weeded them out by now, but just in case anyone who is just tuning in, who is like, well, they're speaking from a place of privilege. Like, we just lost half our sponsorship money on Rear Naked Radio, which was a lot of money because they got hit hard by the economy. Luckily, our other sponsor is Jocko's company, and that guy is like definitely killed a terrorist and doesn't care, and they're making masks and, you know, doing really good work. But the other store, they have 2 locations, and those 2 locations are shut down right now. And so I absolutely had a moment of fear. I absolutely had a moment where I was like, oh, if I lose one more thing, I don't have rent. I can't pay my bills. So I am saying this as someone who is also struggling. And, you know, what I'm trying to do is put out as much content and blow up my other channels and get creative and get innovative with what I can do and how I can get other sources of revenue and blah, blah, blah. But to your point, it's very interesting and incredibly.
Have you started your fans only page?
My fans, soon. And my idea.
I only brought you on here to start making an announcement.
Yeah. Damn it.
All right, you want more?
Yeah. Well, Patreon. Remember, always be plugging the Patreon. I'm so like, I have such like few marketable skills that my idea where I'm like, everyone's struggling, I should do something not as risky. And I'm like, I got it. I'll start writing music again. And I'm like, God damn it, Jamie. Like all of my ideas is like comedy, music, and jiu-jitsu. But it's, to your point, it's so frustrating how people think you're either team economy or team like Corona. And the economy will suffer even worse if we don't it's not like the people who want to quarantine want your business to go out. They want you to quarantine so that your business can hopefully reopen and to stop a bigger outbreak, which will completely fuck your business. It's not this like either or where it's, if we just stop quarantining, everyone will suddenly be okay and all the businesses will open. It's like, no, if we stop quarantining, the businesses will close and infinitely, like, so many more people will die. And again, this is back to this whole like kumbaya hope of mine, which is I wish that instead of fighting about, well, you don't care about jobs, well, you don't care about grandparents or whatever, we could just all be like, hey, this is fucking terrible for everybody. Why don't we all together figure out ways to innovate and try to support the gyms we love, the coaches we love, the internet personalities we love, and make it so we can all do jiu-jitsu ideally in like a couple of months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, that's the other big thing for people for whom jiu-jitsu has saved their lives. I don't know if that's a grammatically correct sentence or not.
I certainly don't.
The people who really think that jiu-jitsu holds their lives together, this is a time-limited problem. This will get better.
Yeah,
and so, you know, it next year, in a couple of months, we don't know yet.
Yeah.
But, you know, we will be training again. There's all kinds of dystopian scenarios in which we'll be training, and we'll save that for another podcast.
Yeah.
I really want to get people down.
Well, and I also realized I never really answered, you know, you brought up the comedy videos in the beginning. And look, I'm not one of those people that says, I'm very sympathetic right now to so I just had this guy on my non-jiu-jitsu podcast, Ron Funches, who's like one of my favorite comedian actor people. And
what's the name of that podcast, Jamie?
Oh, the Jamie Kilstein podcast is my podcast, where we interview like artists and everybody. So I just like the next one is Rob Hubel, who's like my favorite sketch actor, improviser of all time. And then after that is this guy, Ryan Loco, who you might know. He's a big UFC, WWE photographer, but he's hilarious and also like former drug addict. And we pretty much just talk about failure, mental health, all this stuff, except the show is funnier, I promise. And then the Jiu-Jitsu podcast, which you were on, I host with Drew Weatherhead, who runs the Because Jitsu Instagram that I'm sure literally all of you follow. And we're only like 15 or so episodes in, but have had like Florian, Huron Gracie, Jake Shields, Carlos Condit. I mean, it is very quickly turning into a pretty
Gordon Ryan, Gary Tonin coming up soon.
We have had Gary. We did have Gary pre all of this. Gordon probably won't come on because I did a video pretending that he died of the coronavirus. And it was a tribute to him, and I was very distraught.
Maybe he'll agree to an in-person interview.
Yeah, well, I'm still going to if he does agree to an interview, I'm going to pretend the whole time that Corona has affected his memory and he just forgets he has Corona. There was a line I was very proud of in the video. I improvised most of my videos where I said, I want his tombstone to read, "He died how he lived, making fun of the homeless." So I was pretty proud of that. So the Rear Naked Radio is what that's called. We just started an Instagram page today at Rear Naked Radio, but that podcast is blowing up, and Drew and I, we're trying to not be the quote unquote funny guys in jiu-jitsu, even though we're both comedy people, and we talked about a lot of our struggles, and I'm really, really, really proud of it, and the community is growing very fast. But what I was going to say is, I'm not. Oh, so this guy, Ron, he posted this thing where he was like, here's a bunch of things that it's okay if you're feeling right now, because we're all feeling it. And it was linked to depression or food issues, or, the quarantine is bringing out a lot of our sort of buried anxieties or issues. And while I don't think you should surrender to them, I think that this is a really good time for reflection and to work on those issues, which is what I'm doing. I'm also not going to be one of those people that's like, if you don't leave quarantine with a new skill, you're a pussy. But I will say it is a fucking great opportunity to do that. I left my Twitter because Twitter is just a toxic cesspool. Even though Twitter is like the place I'm verified and like the most popular, I was like, fuck that. And I started just going on Instagram, which I had a very small following on Instagram. But I just like it because it's where my jiu-jitsu friends are. It's more inspiring. There's less trolls. And, something that I secretly always wanted to do was make sketches. But even when I was big with stand-up, I would always tell my agents, I don't act. I'm not an act. I want it to be Bill Hicks or Carlin. And I was like, I don't want to act, man. Like, that's for sellouts. And but I love sketch comedy. And I actually really love silly comedy. Like, I love like just goofy Monty Python, Simpsons stuff. Like smart comedy, but silly too. And I was always this self-righteous, angry political guy. And so I was always afraid of acting. I was afraid of singing publicly. Even though I performed to these big places, I would always lip sync Happy Birthday, like really like deep-seated performance issues. And suddenly I'm like locked away by myself, and I have a tripod that I didn't know how to use. I have no idea how to edit videos. And I just made this jiu-jitsu sketch, and Drew posted it, and it blew up. And I was like, here's how I tell people to get good at jiu-jitsu and stand-up is do it every day. And so I go, I'm going to do a sketch every day. And I've just made myself do a sketch every day. And like, my Instagram's gone.
And you would be releasing those on your Instagram channel, what is your Instagram handle again?
At the Jamie Kilstein. And
that's one L in the kill, correct?
Yeah. So it's a J-A-M.
Oh, okay.
JAMIEKILSTEIN, and the Jamie Kilstein. Thank you very much.
Always be pimping, Jamie.
Always be pimping. And the it's really cool. Like, I'm not saying I'm glad this happened, but I used it as an opportunity to kind of force myself to do, like, guys, the bar is so low right now that you can kind of like throw out whatever you've kind of secretly been wanting to throw out. Like, if you have a song you want to put up, if you have, a skill you want to learn, like, no one's judging anybody right now. You can kind of do it and get away with it. And, since I started, like, I mean, in 2 weeks, I got like 3,000 new followers. Like, the videos are doing really well. And I mean, more.
Have you gotten any pushback on them? Because I mean, you took on Gracie Baja today, or was that yesterday?
So no,
It's pretty funny.
It was today.
Pretty
I mean,
funny.
I wake up in the morning and I'll literally just have an idea and I film it. And what I do is I film it in one take, with like lots of pauses and stuff. So that Gracie Baja one, which is Gracie Baja is in a cult, and it was someone trying to convince the camera that he wasn't in a cult, even though he was forced to like sleep in the basement and they have his children, and it was ridiculous.
Based on true events.
Based on true events. But that was like 8 minutes, and then I cut it down to like 2. And what's funny is because I don't know how to edit, and I always thought that was another thing I thought I couldn't do. I'm like, well, I'm a dumb with technology. I was just forced to treat myself or to teach myself. I'm doing these like very rough cuts, which I find hilarious. And a lot of my friends who directed the movie The Aristocrats, he just texted me and he goes, bro, I love the cut you're doing. And I'm like, oh, it's because no one taught me how to do it. And I'm just doing what I think is funny. And so with the pushback, so, I did like a 10th Planet Stoner one. I pretended Gordon Ryan was dying. I went after Corona people. This Gracie Baja cult one. I really haven't gotten a ton. Today I got like 1 or 2.
No cease and desist orders yet.
No, today I got 1 or 2 Gracie Baja ones, but I pretended I was still I stayed in character in the comments section, which I've never done before. So they would be like, this is ridiculous. And I would be like, can you tell me where my children are? And I would just like keep playing along with the bit. And a lot of people, when they're assholes on the internet and you respond to them in kind of a lighthearted way, they're like, oh, well, it was kind of funny, bro. Or like whatever. But what I'm trying to do with jiu-jitsu is like, I never want to be mean. The only kind of cutting line I had this one video about bringing the jiu-jitsu community together again, because everyone was fighting about Corona. And it was like, let's talk about things we can all agree on. And there were like lines about like abortion and Palestine and like all these very controversial issues. But then it ends with like piano music. And I'm like, here's something we can actually agree on. Like, flow grappling is too expensive and the IBJJF like rips off competitor, or it was like something like that. And the only times I will actually go after people, same with on the podcast, it's if I feel like they're doing something to hurt a community I love. But other than that, I'm just kind of trying to find issues that people are talking about and make it funny in sort of like a way that hasn't been done before. So like, for example, on the podcast, my friend Eli Knight, who has that YouTube channel, he does a really good Mike Tyson impersonation, but all the Mike Tyson impersonations you hear are usually really hacky. They're like making fun of him being stupid or something like that. So I asked Eli, I was like, hey, what's like a really esoteric, very white person thing about, like Everett Brother B-sides or some kind of like philosophy? And so he's like a grammatical, he was like an English major or something. And I was like, perfect. So Drew and I will interview him and only ask him about fight questions, and he's only going to want to talk about like esoteric classical literature in this perfect Mike Tyson voice. Like that's what makes me laugh. It's not being mean to someone with the punchline, you know what I mean? And if it's something like, look, I don't like the fact that I've trained with Gracie Baja people who can't be in the group picture because they're dropping by another gym's open mat. I think that's bullshit. And I think that's bullshit for the community. Does that mean that everyone who trains that I'm going to like go to war with Gracie Baja? No, because there are amazing teachers there and there are amazing people there. And so I feel like if I can do it in a silly enough way, which is this guy, it's more about this guy being in denial and being sad and being like, it's weird they want me to divorce my wife to marry off one of the you know what I mean? Like that's kind of my goal. And like Gordon Ryan didn't even get mad if I made a video that I'm like, fuck you, Gordon Ryan, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, if you're a little more subversive about it and a little more, that's the best. When you can make
you keep telling yourself that, and we'll see how many lawsuits you get hit with in the next 6 months.
I know. Yeah, exactly. Can they do that? Can they sue me for that?
Well, why don't you go after Scientology next and find out?
Oh, Jesus. Yeah. Oh, my God.
The Scientology Jiu-Jitsu division. That should go down really well.
That'll go down. You know what's funny? When I first moved to LA, I didn't know what that building was. And I was like, this building's so pretty. And I was like, look at this. I'm like, I kind of want to check this out. And then I realized it was the Scientology building. And I'm like, oh, if I didn't have a girlfriend and I was like a struggling actor, they would have me. I would have just marched right up and been like, yeah, all right, I'm in. Like, it's very appealing. I'm very cult. It's shocking I haven't been kidnapped, is what I'm trying to say. It's dad issues. It's a lot.
Well, how about we finish it on that note, and we won't leave it all here, and I'll get you. We'll chat again in a couple of weeks or in a couple of months.
Yeah.
Good luck on your lockdown.
Thank you, man.
Your 10th planet lockdown and your
thank you so much.
Isolation, working on your meditation lockdown.
The 1/10 planet move I kind of know, even though I train there. And thank you, man, and thank you for speaking out. I'm sure you've also, to everyone listening, it's not easy to speak out on stuff like this, and so I'm sure that you have lost some fans, and so I would applaud the people who have stuck around, agree or disagree, and I think it's really cool, and I'm psyched to hear from your audience.
Talk to you soon, my friend.
All right, bud. See ya.